My name is Lena Hart, and this is the story I never imagined I would one day speak aloud, much less write down. I always believed my life would be simple and steady, the kind of life women in small American towns often lead without complaint or expectation. I grew up just outside Richmond, Virginia, in a modest blue house at the end of Willow Lane, a place where the mailman still waved at every child and where neighbors borrowed sugar as if it were a normal part of breathing. My dreams were never grand. I wanted a 2-bedroom house with a porch swing, a loyal husband, maybe a dog, and a job that did not exhaust my bones. I never wished for wealth or fame or any heavy destiny. I just wished to be safe and loved. At 27, I truly believed I was close to that dream. I had fallen in love with Michael Grant, a man who worked at a local auto shop and had a laugh warm enough to quiet storms. Or so I thought. He had asked me to marry him one quiet evening by the river, slipping a modest ring onto my shaking hand while the sun dipped behind the water. It wasn't a grand ring. It had cost him only a few $100s, but I had cherished it because I thought it symbolized something rare. Commitment. We spent months planning a small wedding at a white church near the highway. The hall was already paid for, the flowers ordered, and I had bought a beautiful lace wedding dress for $1,200, paid in installments from my receptionist job at a dental clinic. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, but inside my chest, something was uneasy. I remember staring at myself in the narrow mirror of the tiny dressing room behind the church. My curls were pinned up, my veil flowed softly over my shoulders, and yet my hands trembled. My best friend Emily Rhodes stood behind me, fixing the last stubborn pin that refused to stay in place. "You look beautiful, Lena," she said, stepping back with a proud smile. I tried to smile too, though the corners of my mouth felt heavy. "Do you think he's nervous?" I whispered. She laughed lightly. "Every groom is nervous. He'll be fine once he sees you." At 1:50, the pastor knocked gently and asked if we were ready. At 2:10, I heard him step outside again to speak with the groomsmen. At 2:20, Emily's smile faltered as she checked her phone for the 10th time. Then my own phone buzzed and everything inside me froze. It was a message from Michael. A single devastating line. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. Please forgive me someday." My breath vanished. The room blurred around me. I didn't scream, didn't faint. I simply felt something inside me collapse quietly, the way an old house gives way after too many years of standing alone. The sounds from outside, the soft music, the chatter of guests, the shuffle of feet, turned into nothing but muffled noise, like the world had drifted too far away for me to reach it again. Emily grabbed the phone from my hand, scanning the message before muttering a curse under her breath. The pastor returned, his face already shadowed with sadness, and someone in the hallway began informing the guests about a delay, though we all knew there would be no ceremony, no vows, no husband, just an ending where a beginning had been planned. Without speaking, without looking at anyone, I walked out the back door of the church. The gravel crunched under my heels as I made my way past the parking lot, past the old oak tree that had shaded generations of weddings, and out onto the road. Cars slowed as they passed me, because how could they not stare at a woman in a full wedding dress standing alone on the shoulder? But I did not care. Not then. The weight of the bouquet in my hands felt like a cruel joke, and the veil fluttering behind me felt like a mockery of promises never given. And there on that roadside, with the warm Virginia wind brushing against my face, I finally cried. Not the delicate tears people cry in movies, but the raw, shaking sobs of someone who has been cracked open. Mascara streaked down my cheeks, dripping onto the lace of my dress. My heart felt like it had been torn straight from my chest and left on the church steps behind me. In the days that followed, my life seemed to unravel in slow motion. The debts from the wedding mocked me every time I looked at my bank account. I had put $4,000 on my credit card, deposits, decorations, food, the photographer who refused to refund me because the cancellation was same day. The hall returned only half of what I paid. Bills stacked on my counter like small tombstones marking the death of my future plans. I returned to my apartment, where the peeling paint on the walls and the thin floor suddenly felt colder than ever. I could not sleep. Each night I lay awake, replaying the moment at the altar where Michael should have stood. I imagined him driving away instead, leaving me without explanation except that pitiful text message. I stopped eating properly and survived mostly on coffee and crackers. At work, patients asked why I looked pale, but I simply said I was tired. Tired was easier than saying abandoned. After a month of pretending to be fine, I walked through my apartment one evening and felt suffocated by everything inside it. The invitation samples still lay scattered across my table. My wedding shoes sat untouched by the door. The ring Michael had given me glinted on the nightstand, as if mocking me from a distance. I knew I couldn't stay, not in that apartment, not in that city, not in that chapter of my life. So I packed what little I owned. A suitcase of clothes, my childhood photo album with the bent corners, a pair of old sneakers, the ring he had given me, though I wasn't sure why I kept it. And when I checked my bank account, I had exactly $873 left to my name. With a shaking breath, I locked the door of my apartment and walked away. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I would go. I only knew I had to leave Richmond behind, or it would bury me in memories I couldn't bear. I didn't know it at the time, but that broken wedding was not the end of my story. It was the doorway into a world far stranger, far more painful, and far more beautiful than anything I had ever imagined. Leaving Richmond felt like stepping off the edge of a life I had clung to for far too long. I didn't choose Cleveland, Ohio for any special reason. I chose it because the bus ticket was cheap and because it was far enough from Virginia that memories wouldn't follow me so loudly. When the bus rolled into the city on a cold morning, the sky hung low as if it were watching me decide whether to start over or fall apart again. I carried only one suitcase in my purse, holding the last pieces of a life that no longer fit me. I found a small room to rent in a brick house owned by an older widow named Nancy Blair. She lived downstairs, and the moment she opened the door to greet me, I noticed the calm steadiness in her kind eyes. She didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. She simply handed me a key, led me upstairs, and pointed to a room with a sloped ceiling and a single window. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and the old wooden floors squeaked with every step, but the room felt warm in a way that reminded me I was still alive. From my window, I could see the narrow street below and a little diner on the corner with a red sign that flickered late into the night. Its soft glow became something like a companion, reminding me that the world didn't stop just because my heart had. I needed a job quickly, and it turned out that the diner Lake Street Grill was hiring. With nothing to lose and $873 left in my account, I walked in and asked to speak with the manager. By that evening, I was wearing an apron and learning how to balance a tray without dropping empty glasses onto the tiled floor. The job did not pay much, $9 an hour plus whatever tips customers felt generous enough to leave, but it kept me moving, and that was something. My life fell into a numb, repetitive rhythm. Wake up, make weak coffee in Nancy's kitchen, walk down the street to the diner, serve food to people who didn't look up long enough to notice me, then return to my small room and stare at the ceiling until sleep caught up with me. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't a life I recognized as my own. It felt borrowed, temporary, like wearing someone else's coat. One rainy afternoon, after a particularly exhausting shift, I slipped into the tiny break room behind the kitchen. The rain outside hammered against the windows, and steam from the dishwashers fogged the air. My feet throbbed from hours of standing, and a table of college kids had just left without tipping a single dollar. I sank onto a worn chair and pulled out my phone, scrolling through job listings with half-closed eyes. Most positions offered barely more than what I was making. Some required degrees I didn't have. I kept scrolling, more out of habit than hope. And then I saw it. Full-time live-in caregiver needed. Private residence. Must be discreet, patient, and kind. High pay. Experience helpful but not required. Travel may be needed within America and Europe. Apply by phone. The bottom line caught my breath: compensation. Starting at $8,000 per month plus housing. I stared at the screen for a long time. $8,000. More money than I had ever imagined earning. It felt unreal. Like something meant for someone else, someone braver, someone more whole. I read the listing 3 times, waiting for the trick to reveal itself. That evening when I returned home, Nancy sat at the kitchen table knitting a blue scarf. A mug of tea steamed beside her, filling the room with the smell of chamomile. "You're home early," she said without looking up. "Just tired," I murmured, dropping into a chair across from her. After a moment I added, "Have you ever heard of someone hiring a caregiver who isn't a nurse?" Nancy raised an eyebrow. "Rich people hire all sorts of unusual help. Why do you ask?" I handed her my phone, and she put on her glasses before reading the listing. Her expression didn't shift much, but she folded her hands thoughtfully. Could be a dream, she said. Could be a scam. Only one way to find out. She was right. So the next morning, with my stomach twisting and my palms sweaty, I dialed the number from the ad. The call connected on the second ring. "Good morning," a calm voice answered. "This is Claudia Reed, assistant to Mr. Victor Hale." Her tone was crisp but not unfriendly. I swallowed hard. Hello. My name is Lena. I saw your ad for a caregiver position." Claudia asked question after question: my age, my work history, if I had any experience caring for someone with medical needs. I didn't. If I was willing to relocate. Relocate? My heart thudded. Relocate where? I asked quietly. "A private estate just outside Charleston, South Carolina," she said. "Mr. Hale is unable to walk and requires help with daily tasks. You would live on the property. All expenses are covered, and travel may occasionally be required, mostly within America or Europe." I stared at the far wall of the diner break room, imagining myself in some grand house, helping a stranger with needs I didn't understand. Felt too big, too far, too unpredictable. But then I thought of my $4,000 credit card debt. I thought of the wedding dress stuffed in my suitcase, the one I hadn't had the courage to throw away yet. I thought of the hollow, sinking feeling of being left behind in a life that no longer made sense. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm comfortable with that." 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane, the first I had taken since I was a child. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, I pressed my forehead against the window and watched the land fall away. Clouds spread beneath us like a white ocean. For the first time since my wedding fell apart, I felt the faintest spark of something like hope. Or maybe it was simply the relief of leaving behind a life that no longer fit me. Claudia met me at the airport in a dark car with tinted windows. She was in her 40s, neatly dressed, with steady eyes that missed nothing. "You must be Lena," she said, shaking my hand. "Welcome." The drive to the estate took about 40 minutes. As we passed through the iron gates, I saw the mansion rise ahead of us, large, white, elegant, with tall columns and a wraparound porch. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, and a stone fountain glistened in the afternoon sun. The house felt both silent and watchful, like it knew I didn't belong there. Inside, the floors shone like polished glass. Paintings of cities, Boston, San Francisco, Paris, Vienna lined the hallways. A grand staircase curved upward like something out of an old European novel. Claudia led me upstairs. "Mr. Hale's condition is serious," she explained. "He can't move his legs. His hands are weak. His mind is sharp, however. He values honesty more than anything." Honesty. The word echoed strangely inside me. We reached a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Claudia turned to me. "Are you ready to meet him?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. She opened the door. And in that instant, my entire world, already bruised and shaken, broke open again. On the bed lay a man with silver hair, thin hands, and tired eyes. His face was older, worn, but unmistakably familiar. I had seen that face before. In a faded photograph my mother kept hidden at the back of a drawer. The man in front of me, the man I had been hired to care for, was my father. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to convince my feet to move or my lungs to breathe. The room stretched wide around me, silent and still except for the gentle hum of machines and the faint rustle of curtains shifting in a soft Carolina breeze. The bed near the window held a frail man whose eyes were far sharper than the rest of him suggested. His face, though worn and sunken with illness, carried a familiarity that struck me like a physical blow. I knew that face, not from life, but from a photograph kept hidden for years in the back of my mother's dresser drawer. For a fleeting moment, I convinced myself I was imagining it. Maybe the shock of moving into a stranger's home, the exhaustion from uprooting my life after the wedding disaster, had twisted my mind into seeing what it desperately wanted or feared. But then the man's eyes widened, recognition blooming slowly and painfully across his tired features. "Lena," he whispered. My name fell from his lips like it belonged to him, like it had always belonged to him. My heart slammed so hard it almost hurt, and for a second I wondered if I was the one who needed the hospital bed and the wires. Claudia glanced between us, her confusion visible in the tight line of her mouth. "You know her, sir?" she asked carefully. the professional calm in her voice slipping just enough for me to hear the crack beneath it. He never looked at her. "Leave us for a moment, Claudia," he said. The tone was soft but carried an unmistakable authority. "Please." Claudia hesitated just long enough for me to feel her concern. Then she turned and slipped quietly from the room, closing the heavy door behind her. The click sounded final, like the lock on a vault ceiling shut around my past. The silence that followed pressed down on me like a weight. I swallowed hard, my throat tight and dry. "How do you know my name?" I managed to ask, though my voice trembled more than I wanted. He didn't speak right away. His hand lifted slowly, a frail, shaking hand that looked too delicate to hold anything, but he reached toward the bedside table. There, beside a glass of half-finished water, lay a worn photograph. The edges were soft with age, the colors faded. He picked it up with care and extended it toward me, though his hand trembled so much I had to step forward to take it. When my fingers closed around the photograph, the breath left my body in one sharp exhale. It was me. A little girl in a yellow dress stood near a stone fountain, laughing at something just outside the frame. Her hair was in two messy braids, her cheeks flushed with sun, her smile so wide it nearly split her face. I knew the picture immediately because my mother kept an identical copy tucked into a cracked album. She rarely opened that album, and whenever I asked about the man beside her in the early photos, she changed the subject. "That little girl," he said softly, "is you. I have looked at that picture every single day for more than 20 years. I held the photograph like it might crumble in my hands. My stomach twisted, my mind spinning. "Who are you?" I whispered. His eyes filled, but he did not look away from me. "My name is Victor Hale," he said, his voice shaking with emotion he could barely contain. "And I am your father." The world tilted. I sank into the chair beside his bed because my legs were no longer certain things. The machines hummed on, indifferent to the explosion inside my chest. For a moment I couldn't speak. I could barely think. "My mother told me you left," I said at last. "She said you cared more about your business than us. She said you never wanted me." His eyes closed tightly, like the words physically hurt him. When he opened them again, the grief in them was raw and unguarded. "Your mother's name was Rachel, yes?" I nodded, unable to trust my own voice. "We met in Chicago," he said, staring past me as though the memories were playing on the wall behind my head. I was young, reckless, hungry for success. I spent half my life on planes, London one week, Milan the next, always chasing the next deal. But when you were born, his voice softened, everything changed. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself in something solid while my world shifted again. "When you were 4, he continued, "we traveled to Barcelona. I thought I could mix business with family just for once. It was a mistake I will regret for the rest of my life." He took a slow breath, steadying himself. We were in a crowded square. Music everywhere, tourists everywhere. I looked away for one moment. One. His voice cracked. "And then you were gone." Heat flashed through my body. Fragments of memory long buried. A crowded place. Someone crying. A stranger's arms lifting me. For years I had believed those images were dreams, or the strange echoes of childhood confusion. Now they throbbed with painful clarity. "We searched for you," he whispered. "Everywhere. Police. Flyers. Volunteers. I stayed in Europe for months, refusing to believe you were lost. But there was no trace. People told us. They told us you were likely dead." He couldn't bring himself to say the word, and I felt tears build behind my eyes. "Your mother and I fell apart," he continued. "We blamed each other. She left without telling me where. I kept searching America, Europe, every lead, every rumor. Years passed. Nothing. I thought I would die never knowing what happened to you." I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. "Why didn't you find me?" I asked softly. "Why didn't you ever come?" "I tried," he said brokenly. "But I was always one step behind. And I was terrified that if I showed up after years of silence, claiming to be your father, I would break you a second time. I wanted to give you the choice, to come to me on your own terms." I stared at him, this billionaire who owned estates and companies, but who now looked like nothing more than a man drowning in regret. "So you put out that job listing," I said slowly, the truth forming like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Yes, he whispered. I knew you needed money. I made the salary high enough to catch your eye. I told the agency to send me applicants with your name or close to it. It was the only way I could think of to bring you here without frightening you. I tried to speak, but the words tangled. What do you want from me now? I finally whispered. He closed his eyes, the rise and fall of his chest small and uneven. When he opened them, they shone with a gentle desperation. Time, he said. Whatever time you are willing to give me. Let me know you. Let me love you. And let me try before my time runs out, to make even a small piece of this right. A man had already abandoned me once, on my wedding day, without hesitation. Yet here was another man, fragile and failing, begging me not to leave. I reached for his hand. It was thin and cool beneath my touch. Okay, I said softly. I'll stay. And in that quiet room beside the father I never knew, something inside me finally shifted. For the first time in a long time, I understood that I was not completely alone. Life inside my father's house settled into a rhythm that felt both gentle and heavy, like a new world unfolding around me one slow day at a time. I moved into a bright room on the second floor, overlooking a wide garden lined with magnolia trees that bloomed like soft white lanterns in the spring. The bed was softer than any I had ever slept in, and the wardrobe was large enough to hold more clothes than I had owned in my entire life. It felt strange to live somewhere so beautiful, knowing I hadn't earned it through anything except blood and a past I barely remembered. Claudia taught me how to tend to my father's needs, how to check the settings on his breathing machine, how to lift his pillows to ease the pressure on his back, how to help him sit upright when eating. Caring for him became a routine that felt less like work and more like learning a language we should have shared long ago. In the mornings, I brought him coffee, just 2 careful sips allowed by his doctor, and read the news to him. He liked hearing small stories. A cafe opening in Seattle, an art show in Florence, even a fundraising marathon in Dublin. He said the small details of life reminded him that the world was still turning, even on the days when his body refused to cooperate. In the afternoons we talked, or rather he asked and I answered. He wanted to know everything: my childhood memories, the foster homes in Baltimore, the apartments where I learned to survive on $40 a week, the heartbreak I carried after being abandoned at the altar. He winced when I told him how Michael had left me. You deserved better than that, boy, he muttered. Man, I corrected gently. He was 30. Then he should have known better, he said, with more fire in his voice than he'd had all day. Sometimes the conversations flipped and he told me stories instead: how he built his first company in Denver, how he moved between America and Europe trying to expand it, how he nearly went bankrupt twice before finding success. He told me of lonely hotel rooms in Lisbon, long nights in London, tense meetings in Geneva, and how none of the victories mattered when he returned to an empty home that used to echo with a child's laughter. He said the silence always reminded him of me. Once I caught him studying my face with a strange, soft expression, and I asked what he was thinking. I was trying to imagine the years I missed, he whispered. Your birthdays, your school days, your first crush, the terrible music you probably listened to. I smiled faintly. You would have hated all of it. Not if it meant I still had you, he replied, and those simple words broke something open inside me. Pain and healing mixing together in a way I couldn't separate. One evening his lawyer, Daniel Price, arrived from New York. Tall and steady, with kind eyes and a quiet manner, Daniel joined us in the study, a room filled with shelves of books and maps of American and European cities. He explained gently that my father had updated his will. My father sat beside us in his wheelchair, pale but alert. What does that mean? I asked, though part of me already sensed the truth. It means, my father said, that this house, the land around it, most of my company shares, and the majority of my accounts will be yours. Some funds will go to charities that helped me during the search for you. But the estate, Lena, everything here, will belong to you. I shook my head slowly. I don't even know how to imagine that much money. Billions of dollars? What am I supposed to do with that? You won't face it alone, Daniel reassured me. We'll assemble a team so you can choose where your resources go and what future you want to shape. I looked at my father then. Why me? You barely had time to know me. His smile trembled. Because you are my daughter. Because I spent more money than I can count trying to find you. And because everyone else in my life chose to stay or leave. You never had that choice until now. I wanted to tell him that I didn't care about his fortune, that I just wanted more days with him. But time had its own plans. In the months that followed, his health slipped away like sunlight dimming at dusk. Some days he spoke with strength. Other days he whispered only a few words. I learned to read the tiny lines on his face, the flicker of pain he tried to hide, the rare, grateful smile he gave me when I sat beside him. One stormy night, with thunder rumbling far in the distance, I held his hand as the machines hummed softly around us. "I'm here," I whispered when he called my name. "I'm glad you didn't marry that man," he murmured. I laughed through my tears. "You've said that before." "I'll say it forever," he replied weakly. "You were meant for more than being someone's second choice." His eyes drifted closed, and I thought he had only fallen asleep. But then the beeping slowed. And then it stopped. "Dad," I whispered for the first and last time. He didn't answer. I sat with him as his hand cooled in mine, as the doctor came, as Claudia wept quietly, as papers were signed. My heart broke again. First abandoned by a man who chose to leave, now losing a man who had finally found me. Days later, Daniel read the will. The estate, the accounts, the shares, everything now belonged to me. I was suddenly worth more than $1,500,000,000, though none of it felt real. For weeks, I couldn't bear the weight of his fortune. I would have given every dollar for another hour with him. But grief softened into purpose. I remembered the foster homes, the hungry nights, the feeling of being lost. So I created the Heart Hale Foundation, dedicated to helping missing children and broken families across America, and eventually parts of Europe. The mansion near Charleston became my home, but it also became something more. A refuge for social workers, teachers, and foster parents who needed rest and support. I learned how to navigate boardrooms in Washington, D.C., and meetings in Brussels, carrying my father's determination inside me. Love didn't sweep into my life the way it once had. Instead, it came gently, through new friendships, through compassion, through the quiet certainty that I was no longer alone. Whether I married again someday mattered less than the fact that I finally had a family made of people who stayed. Sometimes at night, I pause before the painting of Paris in the hall. I think of the little girl lost in a European square and the woman she eventually became. My life broke, healed, and broke again. But it led me here, to truth, to purpose, to a father's love found too late yet cherished all the same. And somehow, through all that loss, I learned how to live my own kind of happily ever after.